The rifle's weight felt familiar in Olivia Smith's hands, like an old friend returning after years of separation. 28 pounds of precision steel and worn wood. The Barrett M82A1 had seen better days, its matte black finish scarred by desert sand and mountain stone, its scope housing dented from a mortar blast in Kandahar 3 years prior. But Olivia knew this weapon's heart, understood the slight pull to the left at distances beyond 800 meters, the way the trigger broke clean after exactly 4.5 pounds of pressure. Preparing and narrating this type of story takes a lot of time and effort. If you like the story, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you want to watch every story of our channel, turn on the bell icon. You sure about this, Smith? Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb's voice carried across the firing line, cutting through the crisp Colorado mountain air. His tone held that familiar mixture of concern and condescension that had followed Olivia through 8 years of military service. That's not exactly a lady's rifle. The words hung in the thin air at 7,000 feet elevation, where Camp Hale's historic training grounds sprawled across a valley that had once prepared the 10th Mountain Division for Alpine warfare in Porsche. World War II. Ghost outlines of old barracks foundations dotted the landscape like ancient graves, reminders of warriors who had proven themselves in conditions that would break lesser soldiers. The irony wasn't lost on Olivia. This place had always been about proving the impossible possible. Around her, 24 of the Army's finest marksmen settled into their firing positions. The annual inter-service precision shooting competition drew the military's elite, Marine Scout snipers with 1,000-yard stares, Navy SEALs who spoke in measured whispers, Delta Force operators whose very presence seemed to bend light around them, and Army Rangers who carried themselves with the quiet confidence of predators. They had come from bases across the continent, each convinced they possessed that rare combination of skill, patience, and killer instinct that separated true snipers from mere shooters. Olivia had earned her place here through 8 years of exemplary service as a combat medic, but her invitation to the competition had raised eyebrows throughout the special operations community. She wasn't infantry. She wasn't special forces. She was a woman in a field dominated by testosterone and tradition, carrying credentials that impressed on paper, but meant little in the brutal arithmetic of long-range killing. "Maybe she should stick to the M4, muttered Gunnery Sergeant Dale Morrison, a Marine Scout sniper whose reputation preceded him like a dark cloud. His weathered face bore the permanent squint of a man who had spent years staring through scopes at distant enemies. "Leave the heavy lifting to those of us with the shoulders for it." The comment drew chuckles from several competitors, but Olivia remained focused on her equipment check. She had learned long ago that responding to such provocations only fed them. Instead, she methodically inspected her ammunition .50 caliber match rounds, each cartridge hand-selected for consistency in weight and powder charge. Her spotter, Corporal James "Rabbit" Rodriguez, knelt beside her with a tablet displaying wind speed, humidity, and barometric pressure readings. "Winds steady at 4 knots from the northwest," Rabbit reported, his young face serious beneath his patrol cap. At 22, he possessed an almost supernatural ability to read environmental conditions, a gift that had saved lives during their deployment in Afghanistan. Temperatures dropping, though. 68 degrees now, should be 65 by the time we reach the 1,000-yard line. Olivia nodded, making mental calculations that accounted for the way cold air would affect her bullet's trajectory. She had learned to think in terms of minute-of-angle adjustments, to feel the subtle shifts in wind direction through the hair on her forearms, to read the landscape's thermal currents like an ancient augur reading entrails. The competition consisted of 5 stages at increasing distances: 300, 500, 700, and finally 1,000 yards. Each shooter would fire 10 rounds at each distance, with scoring based on proximity to center mass on silhouette. Targets: It was a test not just of marksmanship, but of consistency under pressure, the ability to maintain precision as fatigue accumulated and conditions changed. Chief Warrant Officer Sarah Chun, the competition's range safety officer, called the first relay to the 300-yard line. Olivia was assigned to Lane 7, positioned between a Marine Corps scout sniper named Thompson and an Army Ranger who went by the call sign Phantom. Both men were legends in their respective communities, holders of multiple marksmanship records, and neither bothered to acknowledge her presence. "First time shooting with the big boys?" Thompson asked as they settled into the prone position. His tone carried the casual cruelty of someone accustomed to being the apex predator in any room. "Hope you brought earplugs. This might get loud." Olivia adjusted her rifle's bipod legs, testing the stability of her position on the rubber mats. That marked each firing point. The Barrett's muzzle brake would indeed create a thunderous report, but she had fired this rifle hundreds of times in training and combat. She knew its voice, its recoil pattern, the way it would try to lift off. The bipod during the firing sequence. 10 minutes for equipment adjustment and practice dry fire, Chief Chun announced through her megaphone. Live fire begins in 10 minutes. Around the firing line, shooters made final preparations with the focused intensity of surgeons preparing for delicate operations. They adjusted cheek welds, tested trigger pulls, and peered through scopes to verify their zero settings. The ritual was both practical and psychological, a way of entering the meditative state that successful long-range shooting demanded. Olivia's mind drifted to her grandfather, Harold Smith, whose faded photograph she carried in her left breast pocket. He had been a sniper in Korea, credited with 47 confirmed kills during the brutal winter of 1950. His journal, which she had discovered in her grandmother's attic after the old woman's death, contained detailed notes about reading wind, controlling breathing, and most importantly, maintaining emotional equilibrium in moments of extreme stress. "The rifle doesn't care about your feelings," he had written in his careful script. "Fear, anger, excitement, they all affect your hold, your trigger pull, your follow-through. A true marksman learns to become emotionally invisible, to exist only as a conduit between the target and the bullet's inevitable destination." She had memorized those words during her first deployment, when mortar rounds fell around the forward operating base, and the weight of her responsibilities as a medic threatened to overwhelm her 20-year-old mind. The same emotional discipline that had kept her steady while treating wounded soldiers under fire now served her as she prepared to demonstrate skills that most of her peers believed she didn't possess. "Live fire, 300 yards, Chief," Chun announced. "Shooters, prepare to engage." Olivia chambered her first round, feeling the massive cartridge seat itself with mechanical precision. Through her scope, the silhouette target appeared impossibly large, its scoring rings clearly defined against the white paper backing. At 300 yards, even a mediocre shooter could achieve reasonable accuracy with proper technique and equipment. "Fire when ready," came the command. The first shot broke clean, the Barrett's report echoing off the surrounding peaks like distant thunder. Through her scope, Olivia watched the impact dead center in the X-ring, exactly where her crosshairs had settled. She cycled the bolt smoothly, chambering another round while maintaining her sight picture. 9 more shots followed in steady succession, each one placed with deliberate precision. Her shooting rhythm was unhurried but consistent. Breathe, aim, squeeze, follow through, cycle the bolt, repeat. Around her, other rifles cracked and boomed as competitors engaged their targets, creating a symphony of precision violence that spoke to something primal in the human experience. When the ceasefire was called, spotters jogged downrange to score the targets. Olivia remained in position, her rifle pointed safely skyward, watching as Rabbit examined her target through binoculars. "Holy shit," he whispered, loud enough for nearby shooters to hear. all 10 shots in the X-ring. Tightest group I've ever seen at 300. Thompson looked up from his own rifle, squinting downrange at Olivia's target. His expression shifted from casual dismissal to grudging interest. "Lucky wind conditions," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. The official scores confirmed what Rabbit had observed. Olivia had achieved a perfect score of 100 points, with a group size measuring just 1.2 inches center to center. It was the kind of shooting that separated professionals from amateurs, the result of countless hours of practice combined with natural ability and absolute concentration. But 300 yards was just the beginning. As the competition progressed to longer ranges, environmental factors would become increasingly significant, and the margin for error would shrink to almost nothing. The men around her had built their reputations on consistency at extreme distances, and many still viewed her performance as beginner's luck rather than genuine skill. As they prepared to move to the 500-yard line, Olivia caught snippets of conversation from nearby competitors. Their tone had shifted slightly. She was no longer completely invisible, but neither was she fully accepted. She existed in that liminal space reserved for anomalies, curiosities that didn't fit neatly into established categories. "Might have something there," she heard someone say. "Too early to tell," came the response. 500 yards is where things get interesting." Chief Chun's whistle signaled the move to the next firing position, and competitors began the ritualistic process of equipment adjustment and environmental assessment. The late afternoon sun had shifted position, creating different shadow patterns on the range. Temperature continued to drop as mountain air displaced the day's warmth, and subtle wind shifts required new calculations. Olivia settled into her new position with practiced efficiency, but questions nagged at her consciousness like persistent insects. Why had she been invited to compete against the military's elite marksmen? Her service record was exemplary, but she had never claimed to be a sniper. Her medical training and combat experience were impressive, but they didn't explain her presence among these specialists. The mystery deepened when she noticed Colonel Patricia Hayes watching from the observation tower, her expression unreadable behind aviator sunglasses. Hayes was a legend in Army Special Operations, a woman who had broken barriers and shattered glass ceilings throughout her career. Her presence suggested that this competition meant more than the simple exhibition it appeared to be. As Olivia adjusted her scope for the 500-yard engagement, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being evaluated for something larger than marksmanship competition. The way certain officials watched her, the subtle questions Rabbit had been asked about her background, the unusual nature of her invitation, all pointed to a purpose she didn't yet understand. But understanding could wait. For now there was only the rifle, the target, and the space between them where physics and human will intersect it in a moment of absolute truth. Olivia's alarm pierced the pre-dawn darkness at 0430, but she had already been awake for 20 minutes. Lying motionless in her narrow bunk while her mind rehearsed the day's challenges. Fort Carson's transient quarters were a far cry from luxury concrete walls painted institutional green, fluorescent lighting that hummed with electrical dissatisfaction, and the persistent smell of industrial disinfectant that seemed to permeate every military facility in existence. She rose without disturbing her roommate, Staff Sergeant Linda Kowalski, a logistics officer who snored with the regularity of a diesel engine at idle. Olivia had learned to move with the quiet efficiency of someone accustomed to working around sleeping patients, her feet finding the cold linoleum without a sound. The small bathroom mirror reflected a woman who looked younger than her 28 years, 5'6" inches, with an athletic build maintained through daily physical training, brown hair pulled into a regulation bun, and green eyes that seemed to hold depths her peers never bothered to explore. The reflection staring back at her told only part of the story. It didn't reveal the nights she woke in cold sweats, reliving moments when her medical skills weren't enough to save wounded soldiers. It didn't show the weight of carrying secrets about her unconventional training, the hours spent on unmarked ranges with instructors whose names she had been told to forget. It didn't capture the loneliness of excelling in a field where excellence was often viewed with suspicion when it came from unexpected sources. Her morning routine was precise and unvarying. 50 push-ups, 50 sit-ups, a 5-mile run through Fort Carson's winding roads while the base slowly awakened around her. Physical training had always been her meditation, the rhythmic impact of feet on asphalt creating a metronome that helped organize her thoughts. Today, those thoughts centered on the questions that had kept her awake, questions about why she had been selected for this competition and what her superiors expected from her performance. During her run, she passed the base's sniper school, where instructors were already setting up equipment for the day's training. The facility was off-limits to her, its courses restricted to combat armed soldiers with specific military occupational specialties. She had never officially attended sniper school, yet somehow she possessed skills that rivaled or exceeded those of graduates. The contradiction was one of many that defined her unusual career path. Breakfast in the dining facility was a solitary affair. She chose a corner table where she could observe without being observed, a habit developed during deployments, when situational awareness meant the difference between life and death. Around her, soldiers ate with the efficient hunger of people accustomed to uncertain meal schedules. Conversations flowed in the casual profanity of military culture, complaints about officers, speculation about deployments, gossip about relationships, and reassignments. Olivia ate mechanically while reviewing her competition notes on a waterproof tablet. Ballistic coefficients, environmental factors, target distances, the data represented countless hours of study and practice, but numbers could only tell part of the story. Successful long-range shooting required an understanding of variables that couldn't be quantified. The way heat shimmer affected target visibility, the subtle changes in wind direction that occurred between ridgelines, the psychological pressure that accumulated with each shot. Mind if I sit? She looked up to see Captain Michael Torres, a military intelligence officer she had met during in-processing. His request was unusual. Officers rarely socialized with enlisted personnel outside of professional contexts, and his expression suggested this wasn't a casual encounter. "Free country, sir," she replied, closing her tablet. Torres settled across from her, his movements carrying the controlled precision of someone accustomed to operating in environments where carelessness could be fatal. He was perhaps 35, with the lean build of a distance runner and eyes that seemed to catalog details with computer-like efficiency. "Interest in competition you're participating in," he said, cutting into his eggs with surgical precision. "Not many medics get invitations to play with the varsity team." "I suppose not, sir." Makes a person wonder what kind of training produces that level of capability. His tone remained conversational, but Olivia sensed undercurrents of professional curiosity, especially when that training isn't reflected in official records. The statement hung between them like a challenge. Olivia had always known this moment would come, when someone would ask questions she couldn't answer, when her carefully constructed background would face scrutiny from people trained to recognize inconsistencies. "I've always been good with rifles, sir. Natural ability, I suppose." Torres smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "Natural ability is rare. The kind of shooting you demonstrated yesterday requires specific training methodologies, advanced techniques that most soldiers never encounter." Before Olivia could respond, Torres glanced at his watch and stood. "Enjoy the rest of the competition. Sergeant Smith, I suspect it will be quite educational for everyone involved." He left without another word, leaving Olivia with more questions than answers. Military intelligence officers didn't make casual conversation about ballistic capabilities. Their interest usually indicated larger concerned security clearances, background investigations, or operational requirements that remained classified above her pay grade. The encounter cast a shadow over her preparation for the second day of competition. As she cleaned her rifle with methodical precision, Olivia's mind wandered to the events that had shaped her unusual skill set. The truth was too complex for casual explanation, involving classified programs and training opportunities that officially didn't exist. 3 years earlier, during her second deployment to Afghanistan, Olivia had been selected for a program that military records would never acknowledge. For 6 months, she had trained with instructors whose identities remained classified, learning advanced marksmanship techniques that went far beyond standard Army curriculum. The program had been designed to identify and develop unconventional asset soldiers whose official roles provided perfect cover for specialized capabilities. Her medical training had been the perfect camouflage. Combat medics deployed with all types of units had access to areas that other personnel couldn't enter, and possessed the steady hands and emotional control that long-range shooting demanded. She had learned to think like a sniper while maintaining the outward appearance of a healer, a contradiction that sometimes kept her awake at night. The Barrett rifle she carried had been her companion throughout that training, its serial numbers filed away and replaced with fictional identifiers that would satisfy casual inspection. Her instructors had been ghosts, men and women who appeared without introduction and vanished without farewell, leaving behind only techniques and philosophies that had transformed her from a competent soldier into something approaching an artist of precision violence. But artistry required practice, and practice required opportunities that her official duties rarely provided. She had learned to create training time within the margins of military life, rising before dawn to shoot on unofficial ranges, staying after duty hours to dry fire in empty barracks rooms, using leave time to attend civilian competitions that would hone her skills without attracting official attention. The effort had been exhausting and isolating. While other soldiers built careers through conventional channels, leadership courses, advanced training programs, networking within their career fields, Olivia had developed capabilities that she could never officially acknowledge. She had become an expert in a field where expertise was measured by the ability to kill human beings at extraordinary distances. Yet her medical oath compelled her to preserve life at all costs. As she finished cleaning her rifle, Olivia reflected on the contradiction that defined her existence. She was a healer who had been trained to kill, a woman competing in an arena dominated by men, a soldier whose greatest skills couldn't be acknowledged in official records. Each identity was authentic, yet none told the complete story. Her grandfather's journal provided the only guidance she had found for navigating such contradictions. Harold Smith had written extensively about the psychological challenges of long-range shooting, the weight of taking human life from distances where targets seemed abstract rather than personal. The hardest part isn't pulling the trigger, he had noted after a particularly difficult engagement in Korea. It's living with the knowledge that you possess the capability to end human life with clinical precision. Once you cross that threshold, you become something different, not better or worse, necessarily, but fundamentally changed in ways that civilians can never understand. Olivia had crossed that threshold during her third deployment when Taliban fighters had pinned down a medical evacuation team in a valley outside Kandahar. Using skills that weren't supposed to exist, she had eliminated 6 enemy combatants from positions exceeding 800 meters, clearing the way for wounded soldiers to receive life-saving treatment. Her actions had saved lives, but they had also revealed capabilities that raised uncomfortable questions about her training and background. The incident had been classified at levels above her security clearance, its details scrubbed from official records and replaced with sanitized accounts that mentioned her medical heroism while omitting any reference to long-range shooting. She had been recommended for a Bronze Star, but the paperwork had disappeared into bureaucratic channels that seemed designed to minimize rather than recognize her contributions. Now, 3 years later, she found herself competing against the military's elite marksmen in a contest that seemed designed to showcase the very skills she had been taught to hide. The invitation had come through official channels, signed by officers whose names she didn't recognize, but whose authority was unquestionable. Someone wanted to see what she could do, but their motivations remained opaque. As competitors gathered for the day's second stage, Olivia noticed subtle changes in their behavior toward her. Yesterday's casual dismissal had evolved into wary respect tinged with curiosity. Her perfect score, at 300 yards, had been impossible to ignore, forcing acknowledgement of capabilities that didn't fit their preconceptions about female soldiers and non-infantry personnel. Smith called Gunnery Sergeant Morrison, the Marine who had questioned her rifle choice the previous day. His tone had shifted from condescension to professional interest. "Mind if I ask where you learned to shoot like that?" "Practice, Gunny." "Lots of practice. That kind of precision doesn't come from practice alone. You've had professional instruction." It wasn't a question. Olivia shrugged noncommittally. "The Army provides excellent marksmanship training." Morrison studied her with the calculating days of a predator assessing potential competition. "Not that excellent. What you demonstrated yesterday requires advanced techniques that most soldiers never encounter." Before she could respond, Chief Chun's whistle signaled the beginning of official activities. But as competitors moved toward the 500-yard line, Olivia sensed a shift in the competition's dynamic. She was no longer an amusing curiosity or token female presence. She had become a legitimate threat to established hierarchies, and hierarchies didn't dissolve without resistance. The weather had deteriorated overnight, bringing intermittent cloud cover that created changing light conditions on the range. Wind patterns were more complex at the 500-yard line, where mountain topography created unpredictable thermal currents. Temperature had dropped another 10 degrees, affecting both bullet trajectory and shooter comfort. As Olivia settled into her firing position, she felt the familiar calm that preceded moments of extreme focus. Her breathing slowed, her heart rate decreased, and the world narrowed to include only the rifle, the target, and the space between them where physics would determine success or failure. But concentration couldn't entirely suppress the questions that nagged at her consciousness. Why was she here? What did her superiors expect from her performance? And what consequences would follow if she exceeded those expectations? The 500-yard line revealed the first cracks in the competition's facade of collegiality. As shooters adjusted their positions and verified their equipment, conversations carried undertones of professional anxiety. Olivia's perfect performance at 300 yards had elevated her from curiosity to threat, and threats required responses that went beyond polite skepticism. "Sergeant Smith," Chief Chun approached with a clipboard and an expression that suggested official business. "Range control needs to verify your ammunition. Standard procedure for unusual performance." The request was unprecedented. Olivia had never seen ammunition inspected during a marksmanship competition, but she complied without protest, opening her ammo can for Chun's examination. Each cartridge was identical match grade, .50 caliber rounds with consistent powder, charges and bullet weights. There was nothing irregular about her ammunition except its exceptional quality. "Everything appears to be in order," Chun concluded after a thorough inspection, but her tone suggested disappointment rather than relief. "Resume your preparations." As Chun walked away, Olivia noticed several competitors watching the exchange with interest. Their expressions ranged from amusement to confusion, as if they were witnessing a play whose script they didn't understand. The ammunition inspection had been theater, a performance designed to suggest that her shooting success might result from equipment advantages rather than skill. "They're looking for reasons," Rabbit whispered as he settled beside her with his spotting scope. "Can't accept that a female medic might actually be that good." Staff Sergeant Webb approached from the firing line's left flank, his usual smirk replaced by something approaching concern. Smith, I need to ask you something, and I want a straight answer. What is it, Sergeant? Yesterday's shooting. That wasn't luck, was it? Olivia met his gaze steadily. No, Sergeant, it wasn't luck. Then, where the hell did you learn to shoot like that? Because I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never seen a medic who could outshoot scout snipers and rangers. The question hung in the air like smoke from a discharged rifle. Around them, other competitors had stopped their preparations to listen, creating a circle of attention that felt more like an interrogation than casual conversation. I practice, Sergeant. I study. I treat marksmanship like any other military skill that requires development. Webb's expression suggested he found her explanation inadequate. Practice doesn't account for what I saw yesterday. That level of precision requires advanced training, the kind of training that costs serious money and requires serious connections. Before Olivia could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. Is there a problem here, gentlemen? Colonel Patricia Hayes had approached unnoticed, her presence immediately shifting the group's dynamic. Conversations ceased, postures straightened, and the informal gathering transformed into a military formation governed by rank and protocol. No problem, ma'am, Webb replied, his voice carrying the careful respect that senior NCOs reserve for field-grade officers. Just discussing shooting techniques with Sergeant Smith. Hayes' gaze swept across the assembled competitors, cataloging faces and recording expressions with the systematic attention of someone accustomed to reading human motivation. Sergeant Smith's technique seemed to be working quite well. Perhaps you gentlemen could learn something from her approach. The comment carried multiple layers of meaning. On the surface, it was a simple endorsement of good performance. But Hayes' tone suggested deeper implications, that questioning Olivia's capabilities might be professionally unwise, that her presence in the competition had official sanction at levels above their pay grades. Yes, ma'am, Webb replied, but his expression remained skeptical. Carry on, Hayes said, then walked away with the purposeful stride of someone accustomed to ending conversations through authority rather than persuasion. The encounter left Olivia with more questions than answers. Hayes' intervention had been protective, but protection implied vulnerability that Olivia wasn't sure she possessed. The colonel's presence throughout the competition suggested interests beyond simple marksmanship exhibition, but those interests remained opaque. As competitors prepared for the 500-yard engagement, the social dynamics had shifted perceptibly. Casual conversation became guarded. Friendly rivalry acquired edges of genuine competition, and Olivia found herself increasingly isolated despite her success. Excellence, she was learning, could be as isolating as failure when it challenged established assumptions about capability and belonging. The firing commenced with mechanical precision. 10 shots per shooter, scored according to proximity to center. Mass, with environmental factors creating increasing complexity as distances extended. At 500 yards, wind effects became significant, and shooters had to account for bullet drop that required precise elevation adjustments. Olivia's first shot struck center mass with authority that surprised even her. Through her scope, she could see the clean hole exactly where her crosshairs had settled. But success brought pressure rather than confidence. Each subsequent shot carried the weight of expectations she had inadvertently created. Her second shot matched the first. Then her third. By her fifth shot, other competitors had stopped concentrating on their own targets to watch her performance. Their attention was both flattering and uncomfortable, creating an audience for what had begun as a simple demonstration of marksmanship. Unfucking believable, someone muttered. She's not human, came another comment. Has to be the rifle, suggested a third voice. No way, that's pure skill. The commentary continued throughout her string of fire, creating a running narrative of disbelief and grudging admiration. By her 10th shot, a crowd had gathered behind the firing line to observe her performance through binoculars and spotting scopes. When the ceasefire was called, Rabbit jogged downrange to score her target while maintaining radio contact. Target 7. This is Spotter 7. All 10 shots center mass. Group size measures at ... double quotes. He paused, double-checking his measurements. Group size measures 0.8 inches center to center. The announcement created a moment of stunned silence. 0.8 inches at 500 yards represented shooting that exceeded the capabilities of most specialized sniper rifles, let alone the performance typically expected from heavy anti-materiel weapons like the Barrett. Request verification of Target 7, Chief Chun announced over the radio. A second spotter jogged downrange to confirm Rabbit's measurements, returning with documentation that matched the initial assessment. Target 7 confirmed. 10 shots, all center mass. Group size 0.8 inches center to center. The verification triggered a wave of conversation among competitors, range officials, and observers. Olivia's performance was being discussed in terms typically reserved for world records or equipment malfunctions. The shooting was simply too good to fit normal expectations about human capability. "I want to inspect that rifle," declared Gunnery. Sergeant Morrison, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to having his demands met. "Something's not right here." Chief Chun nodded agreement. "Standard procedure for exceptional performance." Sergeant Smith, please present your weapon for technical inspection. The request was humiliating but not unexpected. Olivia had anticipated that exceptional shooting would trigger scrutiny, though she hadn't expected it to occur so publicly. She cleared her rifle and presented it to Morrison for examination, watching as he inspected the barrel, trigger mechanism, and scope with professional thoroughness. "Barrel's clean," he announced after several minutes of examination. "Trigger breaks at approximately 4 pounds. Scope appears to be properly mounted and zeroed." He paused, clearly reluctant to voice his conclusion. "Equipment is within normal parameters." The finding should have ended questions about her performance, but Morrison's expression suggested continued skepticism. "I want to see her shoot a different rifle. If this is pure skill, she should be able to replicate the performance with different equipment." Chief Chun consulted her clipboard, clearly uncomfortable with the request. "That's not part of the established competition protocol." "Make it part of the protocol," Morrison insisted. "We need to know if we're dealing with skill or equipment advantages." Olivia watched the exchange with growing irritation. No male competitor had been subjected to equipment inspection or demands for additional demonstrations. Her success was being treated as suspicious rather than admirable, subjected to scrutiny that revealed more about her critics' assumptions than her actual capabilities. "I'll shoot any rifle you want," she said, her voice carrying across the range with quiet authority. "But I want the same standard applied to everyone. If my performance is suspicious, then exceptional performance from any shooter should trigger the same scrutiny." The challenge created an uncomfortable moment of silence. Morrison's request had been predicated on the assumption that only Olivia's shooting required verification, but applying consistent standards would subject other competitors to the same humiliating process. That Colonel Hayes materialized beside them as if summoned by the tension. "What's the nature of the problem, Chief Chun?" "Some competitors have requested additional verification of Sergeant Smith's shooting capability, ma'am. They want her to demonstrate proficiency with different equipment." Hayes' expression remained neutral, but her tone carried undertones of command authority. "Is such verification required by competition regulations?" "No, ma'am. It's an unusual request. Then I suggest we continue with established procedures. The competition has a schedule to maintain, and these delays are affecting everyone's performance." Morrison's jaw tightened, but he couldn't openly challenge a field-grade officer's directive. "Yes, ma'am. Just trying to ensure fair competition." "Fair competition is exactly what we're providing," Hayes replied. "Sergeant Smith has complied with all regulations and exceeded all standards." Her performance speaks for itself. The colonel's intervention ended the immediate controversy, but Olivia sensed that opposition was organizing rather than dissipating. Her shooting had revealed capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about military hierarchy and gender roles, creating resistance that wouldn't be resolved through official pronouncements. As competitors prepared to move to the 700-yard line, conversations remained focused on her performance. Some voices expressed admiration, others skepticism, and a few carried undertones of resentment that suggested deeper issues than simple competition. "She's making us all look like amateurs," she heard someone say. "Has to be some kind of setup," came the response. "Nobody shoots that well without specialized training." "Maybe that's the point," suggested a third voice. "Maybe we're supposed to be learning something here." The final comment stayed with Olivia as she prepared her equipment for the next phase. Perhaps her presence in the competition wasn't about demonstrating her capabilities to others, but about forcing others to confront their limitations and assumptions. Perhaps someone wanted to see how the military's elite would respond when their expertise was challenged by an unexpected source, but such speculation could wait. The 700-yard line presented new challenges that would require all her concentration and skill. Wind patterns were more complex at the extended range. Environmental factors created increasing uncertainty, and her growing audience meant that every shot would be scrutinized for evidence of either exceptional ability or elaborate deception. As she settled into her firing position, Olivia felt the familiar calm that preceded moments of extreme focus. But beneath that calm lay awareness of the stakes that had risen with each successful shot. She was no longer just competing in a marksmanship contest. She was challenging institutional assumptions about capability, gender, and the nature of military excellence itself. The target at 700 yards seemed impossibly small through her scope, a silhouette that demanded precision measured in fractions of inches rather than the comfortable margins available at shorter distances. Environmental factors created variables that couldn't be completely calculated, requiring intuitive adjustments based on experience and instinct. But Olivia had learned to trust her instincts, even when they led her into territory where others feared to venture. Her first shot at 700 yards would either confirm her growing reputation or reveal the limits that her critics expected to find. The 700-yard line marked a watershed moment in the competition's evolution from friendly exhibition to psychological warfare. As Olivia settled into her firing position, she could feel the weight of scrutiny from 43 pairs of eyes: competitors, range officials, observers, and personnel who had materialized seemingly from nowhere to witness what was being whispered about as either the most impressive shooting display in recent military history or the most elaborate deception ever attempted at official competition. Through her scope, the silhouette target appeared as a dark outline against the white backing, its scoring rings barely visible even at maximum magnification. At 700 yards, environmental factors became paramount: wing speed and direction, air temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, and elevation all conspired to affect bullet trajectory in ways that required both mathematical precision and intuitive understanding of ballistic physics. Creating these detailed military stories requires extensive research and preparation. If you're enjoying this incredible tale of precision and determination, please hit the like button and subscribe for more amazing military stories. Don't forget to ring the notification bell. "Wind's variable," Rabbit reported through their headset, his voice tense with concentration. 3 to 5 knots from the northwest, but I'm seeing thermal currents that could push it northeast in the next 10 minutes. The temperature's steady at 63 degrees, and the humidity at 42%. Olivia made mental calculations while observing heat mirage through her scope. The wavering distortion told its own story about atmospheric conditions, revealing wind patterns that instruments couldn't measure and temperature gradients that would affect her bullet's flight path in ways that defied simple computation. Her first shot broke clean, Barrett's report echoing across the valley like controlled thunder. Through her scope, she watched the bullets impact dead center in the X-ring, exactly where her crosshairs had settled. But instead of satisfaction, she felt the increasing pressure of expectations that had transformed from skeptical curiosity into something approaching scientific examination. Target 7, dead center, Rabbit confirmed through the radio, his voice carrying equal measures of pride and disbelief. That's shot number 11 in the X-ring. Behind the firing line, conversations had ceased entirely. The audience watched, her performance with the focused attention of scholars observing a phenomenon that challenged established theories. Each shot had become a data point in an equation that didn't balance according to conventional understanding of human capability. Her second shot matched the first, then her third. By her fifth shot, even the range officials had abandoned their routine duties to focus on her target. The shooting was beyond exceptional. It was entering territory that suggested either superhuman skill or systematic deception on a scale that would require extensive coordination and sophisticated equipment. Captain Torres appeared at Chief Chun's shoulder, his military intelligence background evident in the way he cataloged details that others might miss. He observed not just Olivia's shooting, but the reactions of spectators, the positioning of officials, and the subtle changes in group dynamics that accompanied each successful shot. "This is unprecedented," Chun whispered to Torres, loud enough for nearby competitors to overhear. "In 20 years of running military marksmanship competitions, I've never seen shooting like this." "Neither have I," Torres replied, his voice carrying implications that extended beyond simple marksmanship. "Evaluation makes a person wonder what kind of training produces this level of capability." His comment was directed at Chen, but Olivia understood that she was the intended audience. Torres was probing, testing her reactions while gathering information about her background and training. Military intelligence officers didn't attend marksmanship competitions for entertainment. Their presence indicated interests that went beyond athletic achievement. Olivia's sixth shot struck center mass with mechanical precision, followed by her seventh, eighth, and ninth. Each impact created fresh murmurs of disbelief from the assembled crowd, as if they were witnessing magic rather than marksmanship. The shooting was too consistent to be lucky, too precise to be accidental, and too sustained to be dismissed as temporary inspiration. Her 10th and final shot completed a group that measured 6/10 of an inch center-to-center shooting that exceeded the mechanical accuracy of many rifles, let alone the performance typically expected from human operators. The measurement was verified twice by independent spotters, each confirmation creating fresh waves of commentary and speculation. 6/10 at 700, someone said. "That's not humanly possible." "Has to be the rifle," another voice insisted. "No way, that's pure skill." "I want to see her equipment," demanded Morrison. "Something's not right here." But equipment inspection had already revealed nothing unusual about Olivia's rifle or ammunition. Her success couldn't be attributed to mechanical advantages, leaving only skill as an explanation skill that challenged fundamental assumptions about human capability and military training standards. As competitors prepared for the 800-yard line, the crowd around Olivia had grown to include personnel who weren't officially part of the competition. Word was spreading through Fort Carson's communication networks, drawing curious observers who wanted to witness what was being described as either the most impressive shooting display in recent memory or the most sophisticated hoax ever attempted. At a military installation, Colonel Hayes materialized beside Olivia as she prepared her equipment for the next stage. "Sergeant Smith, might I have a word?" They walked to a position away from the main group, where Hayes could speak without being overheard by competitors or spectators. Her expression was unreadable, but her body language suggested official business rather than casual conversation. "Your shooting today has been remarkable," Hayes began, her tone carefully neutral. It's also raised some questions that require answers. What kind of questions, ma'am? The kind that involve security clearances and classified training programs. The kind that suggest your personnel records might not tell the complete story. About your capabilities, Olivia felt her stomach tighten. She had always known this moment would come when her exceptional performance would trigger the kind of scrutiny that revealed secrets she wasn't authorized to discuss. Her training had been classified at levels above her security clearance, conducted by instructors whose identities remained unknown even to her. I'm not sure what you mean, ma'am. Hayes smiled, but the expression carried no warmth. I think you understand exactly what I mean. The shooting you've demonstrated today requires advanced training that doesn't appear in your official record. Training that suggests involvement in programs that officially don't exist. The statement hung between them like a challenge. Olivia understood that Hayes possessed information about her background that went beyond standard personnel files. Military intelligence had been investigating her capabilities, probably since her invitation to the competition had been processed. I've always been good with rifles, ma'am. Natural ability combined with dedication to improvement. Natural ability doesn't account for what I've observed today. The techniques you're employing suggest instruction by specialists whose expertise goes far beyond standard military marksmanship training. Before Olivia could respond, Hayes continued, I'm not here to compromise your operational security or expose classified programs. But I need to understand what we're dealing with, because your performance today is going to generate reports that reach very high levels in the Department of Defense. The revelation confirmed Olivia's growing suspicion that her participation in the competition served purposes beyond simple exhibition. Someone wanted to see how she would perform under scrutiny, how she would handle pressure that came not from enemy fire, but from institutional examination. Ma'am, I'm not authorized to discuss certain aspects of my training, but I can assure you that everything I've done here is within the scope of my authorized capabilities. Hayes studied her with the calculating gaze of someone accustomed to reading between lines of official statements. I'm going to accept that answer for now, Sergeant Smith, but understand that your performance today has consequences that extend far beyond this competition. People are taking notice, the right people and the wrong people. She paused, allowing the implications to settle. Continue competing. Shoot to the best of your ability. But understand that every shot is being evaluated by observers whose interests go far beyond marksmanship scores. Hayes walked away, leaving Olivia with the uncomfortable knowledge that her competition had transformed into something approaching a field test. Her shooting was being assessed not just for accuracy, but for operational potential that might lead to assignments she couldn't yet imagine. The 800-yard line presented challenges that went beyond simple distance. Wind patterns were more complex among the surrounding peaks, creating thermal currents that shifted unpredictably as the afternoon sun moved across the sky. Temperature had dropped another 5 degrees, affecting both atmospheric density and shooter comfort during extended firing sequences, but the physical challenges paled beside the psychological pressure that had accumulated throughout the day. Olivia was no longer competing against other shooters. She was competing against expectations that had risen with each successful shot, against assumptions about human capability that her performance was systematically demolishing. As she settled into her firing position, Olivia noticed that some competitors had stopped attempting to match her performance and instead focused on observing her technique. They studied her breathing patterns, her trigger control, her follow-through procedures, searching for secrets that might explain shooting that exceeded their understanding of what was possible. She's not doing anything special, she heard Thompson tell Morrison. Same basic technique we all use. But somehow she's getting results that don't make sense. Has to be something we're missing, Morrison replied. Nobody shoots groups that small at these distances without some kind of advantage. Their conversation reflected the broader confusion that her performance had created. Military marksmanship was understood to be a quantifiable skill with measurable limits. Shooters improved through practice and proper instruction, but ultimate capability was constrained by human physiology and equipment limitations. Olivia's shooting suggested possibilities that didn't fit within established parameters. Her first shot at 800 yards struck center mass with authority that silenced the murmuring crowd. Through her scope, she could see the clean hole exactly where her crosshairs had settled, confirming that her calculations had been accurate despite increasingly complex environmental factors. The second shot matched the first. Then her third. By her fifth shot, even hardened special operations veterans were shaking their heads in disbelief. The shooting was beyond their experience, entering territory that challenged fundamental assumptions about human capability under pressure. "This is impossible," someone said. "She's not human," came another comment. "Has to be some kind of setup," suggested a third voice, but no evidence of deception had been discovered despite intensive scrutiny. Olivia's equipment was standard issue, her ammunition was regulation specification, and her technique employed methods taught in basic marksmanship courses throughout the military. Her success couldn't be attributed to technological advantages or unconventional procedures. Her 10th shot completed another perfect group, this one measuring 7/10 of an inch at 800 yards. The measurement was verified by 3 independent spotters, each confirmation creating fresh waves of commentary and speculation among observers who were struggling to process what they were witnessing. 7/10 at 800, Rabbit announced over the radio, his voice carrying mixture of pride and amazement. Shot number 21 in the X-ring. The announcement triggered a moment of stunned silence. 21 consecutive shots in the X-ring across multiple distances represented shooting that exceeded the performance of specialized sniper rifles, let alone the capability typically expected from individual operators. As competitors prepared for the 900-yard line, Olivia sensed that the competition had transformed into something beyond marksmanship evaluation. Her shooting had revealed capabilities that raised questions about training programs, personnel selection, and operational potential that extended far beyond competitive shooting. But questions would have to wait. The 900-yard line presented her greatest challenge, yet distances where environmental factors created uncertainty that couldn't be completely calculated, where success required intuitive understanding of ballistic physics combined with absolute confidence in her equipment and technique. As she prepared her rifle for the next stage, Olivia reflected on the path that had brought her to this moment. 3 years of classified training, countless hours of practice in conditions that officially didn't exist, and now a public demonstration of capabilities that challenged institutional assumptions about human potential. The target at 900 yards appeared impossibly small through her scope, a silhouette that demanded precision, measured in fractions of inches across distances where minor errors in calculation or execution would result in complete misses. But Olivia had learned to embrace such challenges, to find calm in circumstances that would overwhelm lesser shooters. Her first shot would determine whether her perfect streak could continue, or whether she had finally reached the limits of human capability under pressure. The 900-yard line marked the beginning of what would later be remembered as the most significant 15 minutes in modern military marksmanship history. As Olivia settled into her firing position, she carried the weight of 21 consecutive shots in the X-ring, a performance that had transformed a routine competition into something approaching a scientific revolution. The assembled crowd had grown beyond anything Chief Chun had witnessed in 2 decades of managing military competitions. Word had spread through Fort Carson's communication networks, drawing personnel from across the installation who wanted to witness what was being described in terms typically reserved for natural phenomena or technological breakthroughs. Among the spectators, Olivia noticed faces that hadn't been present during earlier stages of the competition. Senior officers whose presence suggested interest from command levels far above routine athletic exhibitions. Civilian contractors whose business cards probably contained more classified access codes than readable text. Personnel whose uniforms lacked identifying patches or insignia, suggesting affiliations that couldn't be publicly acknowledged. Winds steady at 6 knots from the northwest, Rabbit reported through their headset, his voice carrying the focused intensity of someone who understood that they were participating in something historic. Temperature holding at 58 degrees, humidity at 37%. Atmospheric pressure is stable. Through her scope, the 900-yard target appeared as little more than a suggestion against the mountain backdrop. At maximum magnification, she could barely distinguish the scoring rings that would determine whether her perfect streak continued or finally encountered the limits that her critics expected to find. Her first shot broke clean, the Barrett's familiar recoil pattern transferring through her body with mechanical precision. Through her scope, she watched the bullet's impact, another center hit that brought her consecutive X-ring shots to 22. The crowd's reaction was muted, as if they were witnessing something too unprecedented for normal emotional responses. Target 7, center mass, Rabbit confirmed over the radio, his voice barely controlled. 10 ring number 22. Behind the firing line, conversations had evolved from skepticism through disbelief into something approaching reverence. Military personnel were witnessing shooting that challenged their understanding of human capability, performance that suggested possibilities they had never considered. "She's rewriting the textbooks," Torres whispered to Colonel Hayes, his intelligence background evident in the way he processed implications that extended far beyond competitive shooting. This level of consistency suggests training methodologies that go far beyond standard military programs. Hayes nodded, her expression revealing nothing of the classified briefings that had preceded Olivia's selection for the competition. The question isn't where she learned to shoot like this. The question is what we do with someone who possesses these capabilities. Their conversation was interrupted by Olivia's second shot, which matched her first with mechanical precision. Then her third, fourth, and fifth, each impact creating fresh murmurs of amazement from spectators who were struggling to process what they were witnessing. By her seventh shot, even the most hardened special operations veterans were shaking their heads in disbelief. The shooting transcended anything in their experience, entering territory that challenged fundamental assumptions about training, selection, and human potential under extreme pressure. 28 consecutive X-ring shots, someone said, at distances from 300 to 900 yards, with a rifle that weighs 28 pounds and kicks like a mule. "It's not possible," Morrison muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Evidence was accumulating that contradicted his assumptions about what was possible, forcing acknowledgement of capabilities that didn't fit within established categories. Olivia's eighth shot struck center mass with authority that seemed to defy atmospheric physics. Wind, temperature, humidity, and elevation had created conditions that should have made such precision impossible. Yet her bullets continued to find their intended targets with supernatural consistency. Her ninth shot brought gasps from the assembled crowd. 29 consecutive shots in the X-ring represented performance that exceeded the mechanical accuracy of most specialized sniper rifles, achieved by a human operator under field conditions with standard military ammunition. As she prepared for her 10th and final shot at 900 yards, Olivia felt the weight of expectations that had transcended simple marksmanship evaluation. Her performance was being assessed not just for accuracy, but for implications that could reshape military thinking about training, selection, and operational capability. The target seemed impossibly distant through her scope, a silhouette that demanded absolute precision across atmospheric conditions that created uncertainty in every variable. But Olivia had learned to find calm in such circumstances, to trust instincts that had been refined through training that officially didn't. Exist. Her final shot broke clean, the Barrett's report echoing across the valley with finality that seemed to mark the end of an era. Through her scope, she watched the impact center mass in the X-ring, bringing her consecutive hits to 30. Target 7, X-ring, Rabbit announced over the radio, his voice carrying emotions that ranged from pride to disbelief. 30 consecutive shots, all center mass, all X-ring. The announcement created a moment of absolute silence that stretched across the entire range. Spectators, competitors, and officials stood motionless, processing what they had witnessed in terms that challenged their understanding of human capability. Then applause began, tentative at first, then building into sustained recognition of something unprecedented in military history. Even Morrison joined the applause, his skepticism finally overwhelmed by evidence that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. Sergeant Smith, Colonel Hayes approached with an expression that suggested official business beyond competitive recognition. I need you to understand what you've accomplished here today. 30 consecutive X-ring shots across multiple distances represents shooting that will be studied and analyzed at the highest levels of the Department of Defense. She paused, allowing the implications to settle. Your performance today has demonstrated capabilities that suggest training and selection criteria that go far beyond standard military programs. People are going to want answers about how such shooting is possible. Before Olivia could respond, Hayes continued. But they're also going to want to understand what such capabilities mean for operational planning, mission selection, and strategic deployment of specialized assets. The final phrase carried implications that extended far beyond competitive shooting. Olivia understood that her performance had revealed capabilities that could reshape her career in directions she couldn't yet imagine, involving assignments and responsibilities that would test more than just her marksmanship skills. As competitors prepared for the final 1,000-yard stage, conversations remained focused on Olivia's unprecedented performance. Some voices expressed admiration, others confusion, and a few carried undertones of concern about what such shooting meant for established hierarchies and traditional assumptions about military capability. 30 consecutive X-ring shots, Thompson said to Morrison, across 6 different distances with varying environmental conditions, using standard equipment with regulation ammunition. I've never seen anything like it, Morrison replied, his earlier skepticism replaced by grudging acknowledgement of exceptional ability. Makes you wonder what other capabilities are out there that we don't know about. The comment reflected broader implications that extended far beyond competitive shooting. Olivia's performance had revealed possibilities that suggested gaps in institutional knowledge about training methodologies, selection criteria, and human potential under extreme conditions. But speculation would have to wait. The 1,000-yard line represented her final test, the ultimate measurement of capabilities that had already exceeded everyone's expectations. Environmental factors were most complex at extreme range, where minor errors in calculation or execution would result in complete misses rather than merely reduced scores. As she prepared her equipment for the final stage, Olivia reflected on the transformation that had occurred throughout the day. She had begun the competition as a curiosity, a female medic whose invitation to compete among elite marksmen had raised eyebrows and generated skeptical commentary. Now she approached the final stage as something approaching a phenomenon, a shooter whose performance challenged fundamental assumptions about human capability and military training standards. Her success had elevated her from participant to subject of study, from competitor to case study in possibilities that institutions were only beginning to understand. The 1,000-yard target appeared impossibly distant through her scope, a silhouette that represented the ultimate test of everything she had learned through years of training that officially didn't exist. Environmental factors created variables that couldn't be completely calculated, requiring intuitive adjustments based on experience and instinct that transcended mathematical precision. But Olivia had learned to trust her instincts, even when they led her into territory where others feared to venture. Her first shot at maximum distance would determine whether her perfect streak could survive the ultimate test of capability under pressure, or whether she had finally encountered limits that even her exceptional training couldn't overcome. 6 months later, the ripple effects of Olivia's performance continued to reshape military thinking about marksmanship training, personnel selection, and operational capability. Her shooting had been analyzed by ballistics experts, studied by training specialists, and discussed in classified briefings that reached the highest levels of the Department of Defense. The Barrett rifle she had used during the competition was retired to the Army Marksmanship Units Museum, where it occupied a place of honor alongside weapons that had made history in previous conflicts. A small plaque identified it as the rifle used by Sergeant Olivia Smith during her unprecedented perfect performance at the inter-service precision shooting competition, but the rifle's retirement was largely ceremonial. Olivia had been reassigned to duties that required capabilities she couldn't discuss, operating in environments where her exceptional skills could be employed for purposes that went far beyond competitive shooting. Her new position came with a security clearance that exceeded her previous access levels and responsibilities that extended far beyond her medical training. The competition itself had been classified at levels that prevented public discussion of specific performance details. Official records mentioned the event in sanitized terms that avoided reference to shooting that challenged established understanding of human capability. Media coverage was discouraged through methods that ensured Olivia's achievements remained known only within military circles that could appreciate their significance. Chief Chun had retired from her position as range safety officer, accepting a consulting position with a defense contractor that specialized in advanced training methodologies. Her final report on the competition had been classified above her security clearance, its contents known only to officials whose responsibilities included the kind of strategic planning that transcended conventional military thinking. Morrison and Thompson had both requested transfers to training positions where they could study methodologies that produced exceptional marksmanship capability. Their applications had been approved, leading to assignments that involved developing new curricula for programs that officially didn't exist. Captain Torres had been promoted to major and reassigned to duties that involved recruiting and assessing personnel whose capabilities might exceed standard military categories. His new position required travel to locations that couldn't be publicly acknowledged, evaluating candidates whose potential contributions to national security transcended conventional understanding of military service. Colonel Hayes had received her first star, along with responsibilities that included overseeing programs designed to identify and develop unconventional assets, whose capabilities could provide strategic advantages in conflicts that hadn't yet been imagined. Her promotion ceremony had been private, attended only by officials whose presence couldn't be publicly acknowledged. 1 year after the competition, Olivia stood on a different range in a location that couldn't be named, preparing equipment for missions that couldn't be described. Her targets were no longer paper silhouettes marked with scoring rings, but objectives that required precision measured in consequences rather than inches. The Barrett rifle had been replaced by weapons whose specifications remained classified, chambered for ammunition that didn't exist in standard inventories. Her scope bore no manufacturer's markings, its optics designed for conditions that pushed the boundaries of what was possible in long-range engagement, but the fundamentals remained unchanged. Breathing, sight alignment, trigger control, follow through the basic principles that had guided her grandfather through the frozen hills of Korea and had carried her through competitions that seemed like distant memories from a simpler time. 3 years later, Dr. Sarah Martinez stood before a lecture hall filled with advanced marksmanship instructors. Her PowerPoint presentation, displaying performance metrics that continued to challenge conventional understanding of human capability under Extreme stress. The data points represented 3 years of analysis following what she termed the Smith incident, a shooting performance that had fundamentally altered military thinking about training methodologies and personnel selection criteria. 35 consecutive shots in the X-ring across distances from 300 to 1,000 yards. She explained to the assembled audience of special operations trainers and ballistics experts. Environmental conditions that should have made such precision impossible, yet achieved with consistency that exceeded the mechanical accuracy of most specialized rifle systems. In the audience, newly promoted Sergeant Major Marcus Webb took careful notes. His skepticism about female soldiers and non-infantry personnel had been systematically demolished by witnessing shooting that transcended his understanding of what was possible. He now directed a training program that specifically recruited personnel whose capabilities might exceed conventional categories. The question isn't how such performance was achieved, Dr. Martinez continued. The question is what such performance tells us about human potential that we've been systematically underestimating. Her research had led to the development of new selection criteria for specialized programs, methods that identified candidates based on psychological profiles and physiological markers, rather than traditional military occupational specialties. The results had been remarkable: female medics who shot better than scout snipers, supply clerks who demonstrated tactical awareness that exceeded infantry veterans, mechanics who possessed instincts for long-range shooting that couldn't be taught through conventional methods. "We've been looking for snipers in all the wrong places," Webb told his assistant after the presentation. "Turns out the best shooters might be hiding in plain sight, wearing job descriptions that have nothing to do with their actual capabilities." The revelation had led to wholesale changes in recruitment and training practices. Programs that had traditionally focused on combat arms personnel began actively seeking candidates from support specialties, discovering reservoirs of talent that had been overlooked by conventional selection methods. 5 years. Ladder Rabbit, now Staff Sergeant James Rodriguez, stood in the equipment room of an advanced marksmanship training facility that didn't appear on any official organizational charts. Around him, instructors prepared for a course that would train the next generation of precision shooters using methodologies that had evolved from studying Olivia's unprecedented performance. "She changed everything," he told the newest class of students, a mixed group of male and female soldiers whose military occupational specialties ranged from infantry to intelligence to medical services. "Not just how we think about shooting, but how we think about human potential." The training facility had been established specifically to replicate the conditions that had produced Olivia's exceptional capabilities. Students learned not just marksmanship techniques, but psychological control methods, physiological optimization strategies, and environmental awareness skills that transcended traditional military curricula. "The rifle doesn't care about your gender or your job description," Rodriguez continued, echoing lessons he had learned while spotting for the most exceptional shooter he had ever observed. "What matters is your ability to achieve perfect synthesis between mind, body, and weapon under conditions that would break lesser individuals." Among his students, he noticed the same mix of skepticism and curiosity that had characterized reactions to Olivia's invitation to compete among elite marksmen. But skepticism was quickly overcome by performance standards that demanded excellence regardless of background or preconceptions. The program's success rate had exceeded all projections. Students achieved proficiency levels that would have been considered impossible under traditional training methods, demonstrating capabilities that suggested human potential had been systematically underestimated by conventional military thinking. "Where is she now?" asked Private First Class Jennifer Chang, one of the program's most promising female students. Rodriguez smiled but didn't answer directly. "Sergeant Smith is serving her country in ways that go beyond what we can discuss in this classroom." "But Her legacy lives in every shot you take, every target you engage, every moment you choose excellence over mediocrity. The non-answer carried implications that students were learning to recognize. Olivia had transcended competitive shooting to become something approaching a myth, a figure whose actual assignments remained classified, but whose influence shaped everything they did. 7 years later, the congressional hearing room buzzed with controlled tension as General Patricia Hayes, now wearing 3 stars, testified before the House Armed Services Committee about programs that had revolutionized military capabilities while remaining largely invisible to public scrutiny. The Smith protocols, as they had come to be known within classified circles, had produced operational results that exceeded all projections. Female soldiers were achieving success rates in specialized assignments that challenged every assumption about gender roles in combat operations. Personnel from support specialties were demonstrating tactical capabilities that rivaled those of traditional special operations forces. General Hayes asked Congresswoman Rebecca Martinez, the committee's ranking member, "Can you explain why these training methodologies remained classified for so long?" Hayes chose her words carefully, aware that her testimony would be studied by analysts whose interests ranged from legitimate oversight to potential espionage. The capabilities these programs develop could provide strategic advantages to our adversaries if the methodologies became publicly known. We classified the training to protect operational security. What she didn't mention was that several of the program's graduates were currently deployed in locations that couldn't be acknowledged, performing missions that would reshape regional security dynamics if their details became public knowledge. Olivia Smith had become the prototype for a new category of military specialist, one whose capabilities transcended conventional understanding of human potential. Are these programs producing the results that justify their classified status? Asked Congressman Michael Torres, the former military intelligence officer who had observed Olivia's unprecedented shooting performance years earlier. "The programs are producing results that exceed our most optimistic projections," Hayes replied. "Personnel who might never have been considered for specialized assignments under traditional selection criteria are achieving success rates that challenge our understanding of human capability." Behind the classified nature of her testimony lay 3 years of operational successes that had redefined what was possible in unconventional warfare. Female snipers were achieving kill ratios that exceeded those of their male counterparts. Support personnel were demonstrating tactical intuition that saved lives in situations where conventional training would have failed. The Smith incident, as it was still referenced in classified documents, had revealed capabilities that existed throughout the military but had been overlooked by traditional selection methods. The resulting programs had identified and developed talent that was reshaping American military effectiveness in ways that couldn't be publicly acknowledged. 10 years later, the memorial service was attended by personnel whose presence couldn't be officially recorded. They gathered in a small chapel at Arlington National Cemetery to honor someone whose contributions to national security transcended anything that could be acknowledged in public ceremonies or official records. The simple granite headstone bore only basic information: Olivia Smith, Staff Sergeant, United States Army, 1997 to 2027, beloved daughter and dedicated soldier. No mention was made of marksmanship records, classified assignments, or operational successes that had saved lives in conflicts that remained officially unacknowledged. Rabbit stood among the mourners, now a sergeant major responsible for training programs that had evolved from studying her unprecedented performance. Around him, he recognized faces from the original competition: Morrison, Thompson, Webb, Chen, all of whom had been transformed by witnessing shooting that challenged their understanding of human possibility. "She never knew," whispered Sarah. Chen, now a senior defense contractor specializing in advanced training methodologies, never knew how completely she changed everything. The truth was more complex. Olivia had understood that her shooting demonstration would have consequences beyond competitive recognition. But she had chosen to excel regardless of those consequences, demonstrating capabilities that forced institutions to confront assumptions they had never questioned. Her funeral was attended by 3-star generals and CIA operatives, by foreign military attaches and defense contractors whose business cards contained more classified markings than readable text. They came to honor someone whose legacy extended far beyond her individual achievements, someone who had revealed possibilities that institutions were still learning to understand. The programs that had evolved from studying her performance now operated on every continent, producing specialists whose capabilities transcended conventional military categories. Female snipers achieved kill ratios that exceeded their male counterparts. Support personnel demonstrated tactical intuition that saved lives in situations where traditional training failed. 15 years later, Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer Chang stood before her first independent command, a mixed-gender unit whose capabilities would have been considered impossible before the Smith protocols revolutionized military thinking about human potential. Her soldiers came from diverse backgrounds: former medics, supply clerks, intelligence analysts, mechanics united only by psychological profiles and physiological markers that predicted exceptional performance under extreme stress. Today we honor someone you've never met, but whose influence shapes everything we do, she told her assembled troops. 15 years ago, a female medic demonstrated shooting that challenged every assumption about human capability. Her performance forced institutions to recognize talent they had been systematically overlooking. In the audience, she saw the same mix of curiosity and skepticism that had characterized reactions to Olivia's original invitation to compete among elite marksmen. But skepticism was quickly overcome by training standards that demanded excellence, regardless of background or preconceptions. Sergeant Smith proved that capability transcends categories. Chung continued. Gender, job description, traditional qualifications, none of that matters when measured against actual performance under pressure. Her unit had been formed specifically to exploit capabilities that conventional military thinking continued to underestimate. They operated in environments where traditional special operations forces might attract unwanted attention, their diverse backgrounds providing cover for assignments that required capabilities no one expected them to possess. Success of such units had led to wholesale changes in military culture. Female soldiers were no longer viewed as exceptions to be accommodated, but as assets whose capabilities might exceed those of their male counterparts in specific operational contexts. Support personnel were recognized as potential sources of tactical excellence that traditional selection methods had overlooked. Every shot you take, every mission you complete, every moment you choose excellence over mediocrity honors her memory, Chang told her soldiers. You are living proof that human potential exceeds our ability to measure or predict it. After the ceremony, Chang returned to her office where a framed photograph occupied a place of honor on her desk. It showed Olivia at the moment of her final shot during the 1,000-yard stage, her face reflecting the calm concentration that had enabled shooting that transcended human understanding. Below the photograph, a simple plaque bore words that had become the unofficial motto of specialized units operating around the world. Capability transcends categories. It was a lesson that Olivia Smith had taught through demonstration rather than discussion, showing rather than telling institutions what was possible when human potential was properly recognized and developed. Her legacy lived in every female soldier who achieved what others considered impossible, in every support specialist who demonstrated tactical excellence, in every moment when performance exceeded expectations based on traditional assumptions about military capability. The competition that had revealed her unprecedented abilities now seemed like a distant memory from a simpler time, when military excellence was measured in categories that couldn't contain the reality of human potential. Olivia had shattered those categories through 35 consecutive shots that forced institutions to confront possibilities they had never imagined. And in operational theaters around the world, her spiritual descendants continued that legacy. Female snipers achieving impossible shots, support personnel demonstrating tactical brilliance, soldiers whose capabilities transcended every assumption about what was possible when human potential was properly recognized and developed. The silence that had followed her final shot at the 1,000-yard line had indeed been broken, replaced by a symphony of achievement that echoed across military installations worldwide, where her example continued to inspire excellence that exceeded all understanding of human limitation. The 1,000-yard line stretched before Olivia like a bridge between who she had been and who she was becoming. The target appeared impossibly distant through her scope, a dark silhouette that represented not just the final stage of competition, but the ultimate test of capabilities that had already rewritten the rules of military marksmanship. At this distance, every variable became critical. Wind patterns shifted unpredictably across the valley's complex terrain, creating thermal currents that could deflect bullets by inches. Temperature gradients affected atmospheric density in ways that required intuitive adjustment beyond mathematical calculation. The Earth's rotation itself became a factor, the Coriolis effect that caused bullets to drift laterally over extreme distances. But Olivia had trained for such conditions in places that didn't exist on official maps, under instructors whose expertise transcended anything found in standard military curricula. She understood ballistic physics not just as academic theory, but as lived experience gained through thousands of rounds fired in conditions that tested the absolute limits of human capability. "Wind's complex," Rabbit reported through their headset, his voice tight with concentration. 8 knots from the northwest at ground level, but I'm seeing signs of cross winds at altitude. Temperature gradient suggests thermal activity that could affect bullet trajectory. Through her scope, Olivia observed heat mirage that told its own story about atmospheric conditions. The wavering distortion revealed wind patterns that instruments couldn't measure, temperature variations that would affect her bullet's flight path in ways that defied simple computation. Reading such signs required instincts that came only through experience in environments where miscalculation meant mission failure rather than mere point deduction. Behind the firing line, the assembled crowd had grown beyond anything Chief Chun had witnessed in her career. Personnel from across Fort Carson had abandoned their duties to witness what was being discussed in terms typically reserved for historic events. Senior officers who rarely left their offices stood shoulder to shoulder with enlisted personnel, united by curiosity about shooting that challenged their understanding of human limitation. Colonel Hayes positioned herself where she could observe both Olivia's performance and the crowd's reactions. Her intelligence background enabled her to read the implications that extended far beyond competitive shooting. Olivia's demonstration was being evaluated not just for marksmanship excellence, but for strategic potential that could reshape military thinking about unconventional assets and specialized capabilities. "This is unprecedented," Torres whispered to Hayes, his voice carrying the controlled excitement of someone witnessing history. 30 consecutive X-ring shots across multiple distances with varying environmental conditions, using standard equipment, with regulation ammunition. Hayes nodded but remained focused on broader implications. The question isn't what she's accomplished here today. The question is what such capabilities mean for operational planning and strategic deployment. Their conversation was interrupted by range commands that signaled the beginning of the final stage. Olivia chambered her first round at 1,000-yard distance, feeling the massive cartridge seat itself with mechanical precision. Through her scope, the target appeared as little more than a suggestion against the mountain backdrop, its scoring rings invisible even at maximum magnification. Environmental factors created uncertainty in every variable: wind speed and direction, fluctuated moment by moment. Temperature continued dropping as mountain air displaced the day's warmth. Atmospheric pressure showed subtle variations that could affect bullet trajectory in ways that required constant adjustment. But Olivia had learned to find calm in such complexity, to trust instincts that had been refined through training that officially didn't exist. Her breathing slowed, her heart rate decreased, and the world narrowed to include only the rifle, the target, and the space between them where physics would determine success or failure. "Fire when ready," Chief Chun announced. Olivia's first shot broke clean, the Barrett's report echoing across the valley like controlled thunder. Through her scope, she watched the bullet's flight, a trace that lasted less than 2 seconds, carried the weight of expectations that had accumulated throughout the day. Impact, center mass, X-ring. Target 7, dead center, Rabbit confirmed over the radio, his voice carrying disbelief that had become routine. Shot 31 in the X-ring. The crowd's reaction was muted, as if they were witnessing something too unprecedented for normal emotional responses. Military personnel who had spent careers studying human capability were observing performance that challenged fundamental assumptions about what was possible under extreme stress. Her second shot matched the first, followed by her third with mechanical precision that seemed to mock atmospheric physics. Each impact created fresh murmurs of amazement from spectators who were struggling to process shooting that exceeded their understanding of human limitation. By her fifth shot at 1,000-yard distance, even the most hardened special operations veterans were abandoning their professional composure. The shooting transcended anything in their experience, entering territory that suggested possibilities they had never considered. 35 consecutive X-ring shots, someone said, across 6 different distances with constantly changing environmental conditions. "It's not humanly possible," Morrison muttered, but his voice carried defeat rather than conviction. Evidence was accumulating that contradicted everything he thought he knew about marksmanship and human capability. Olivia's sixth shot struck center mass with authority that seemed to defy mathematical probability. Through her scope, she could see the clean hole exactly where her crosshairs had settled, confirming that her calculations had been accurate despite environmental factors that should have made such precision impossible. Her seventh shot brought gasps from the assembled crowd. 37 consecutive shots in the X-ring represented performance that exceeded the mechanical accuracy of most specialized sniper rifles, achieved by a human operator under field conditions that created maximum uncertainty. As she prepared for her eighth shot, Olivia felt the weight of history settling around her like mountain fog. Her performance was being witnessed by personnel whose testimonies would shape military policy for decades. Each shot was creating precedents that would influence training programs, selection criteria, and operational planning in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The eighth shot struck center mass with finality that seemed to punctuate a larger argument about human potential. Through her scope, she could see the growing cluster of impacts that told the story of shooting beyond normal comprehension. Her ninth shot brought absolute silence from the assembled crowd. 39 consecutive X-ring shots across multiple distances represented performance that would be studied by ballistics experts and training specialists for years to come. The shooting had transcended competitive exhibition to become scientific data that challenged established understanding of human capability. As Olivia prepared for her final shot, the 40th, that would complete her unprecedented demonstration, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 8 years of military service, 3 deployments, countless hours of training in conditions that officially didn't exist, and now a public demonstration of capabilities that challenged institutional assumptions about gender, specialization, and human limitation. The final target appeared impossibly distant through her scope, a silhouette that represented not just the end of competition, but the beginning of transformation that would reshape her life in directions she couldn't yet understand. Environmental factors had created maximum complexity: wind, temperature, humidity, and elevation conspiring to make precision nearly impossible. But Olivia had learned to embrace such challenges, to find opportunity in circumstances that would overwhelm lesser shooters. Her breathing slowed to match her heartbeat, her muscle tension relaxed into perfect stillness, and her mind achieved the meditative state that successful long-range shooting demanded. The final shot broke clean, the Barrett's familiar recoil, transferring through her body with mechanical precision. Through her scope, she watched the bullet's flight across nearly half a mile of Colorado mountain air, carrying with it the weight of expectations and implications that extended far beyond. Competitive shooting. Impact, center mass, X-ring. Target 7, center mass, Rabbit announced over the radio, his voice breaking with emotion. X-ring number 40. Perfect score. Unprecedented performance. The announcement triggered an explosion of applause that echoed across the valley like sustained artillery fire. Spectators who had witnessed history applauded with enthusiasm that reflected their understanding of what they had observed: shooting that challenged fundamental assumptions about human capability and military potential. But beneath the celebration lay awareness of consequences that extended far beyond competitive recognition. Olivia's performance had revealed capabilities that would reshape her career in directions involving assignments she couldn't yet imagine, responsibilities that would test more than just her marksmanship skills. Colonel Hayes approached with an expression that suggested official business beyond congratulations. Sergeant Smith, your performance today has been remarkable. It's also generated interest from organizations whose requirements go far beyond competitive shooting. She paused, allowing implications to settle. You're going to receive offers for assignments that involve capabilities you've demonstrated here today. Some of those offers will come from organizations whose existence can't be publicly acknowledged. Before Olivia could respond, Hayes continued. Think carefully before accepting such offers. The capabilities you've revealed today could lead to assignments that change your life in ways you might not anticipate. The warning carried layers of meaning that Olivia was only beginning to understand. Her shooting had demonstrated capabilities that transcended competitive exhibition, revealing potential for operational assignments that would test everything she thought she knew about herself and her place in the military structure. 20 years after the competition, Dr. Jennifer Chang, now Director of Advanced Marksmanship Research at the Army War College, stood before an auditorium filled with military historians, ballistics experts, and training specialists from around the world. Her presentation carried a classification level that restricted attendance to personnel with appropriate security clearances and operational need to know. The Smith incident, as it was still referenced in classified literature, had fundamentally altered military thinking about human potential, training methodologies, and personnel selection criteria. 20 years of analysis had produced insights that continued to reshape how modern militaries identified and developed exceptional capabilities. 40 consecutive shots in the X-ring across distances from 300 to 1,000 yards. She explained to the assembled audience. Environmental conditions that should have made such precision impossible, yet achieved with consistency that exceeded mechanical limitations of the rifle system itself. In the audience, she recognized faces from the original competition, now retired generals, senior defense contractors, and training specialists, whose careers had been shaped by witnessing performance that challenged their understanding of human capability. They had gathered to commemorate an anniversary that couldn't be publicly acknowledged, but whose implications continued to influence military operations worldwide. Sergeant Major James Rodriguez, Olivia's former spotter, occupied a seat in the front row. His career had been defined by association with unprecedented shooting that had forced institutions to confront assumptions they had never questioned. He now directed training programs that specifically sought personnel whose capabilities might exceed conventional categories. The methodologies developed from studying her performance have produced operational results that continue to exceed projections, Chang continued. Female soldiers achieving success rates in specialized assignments that challenge traditional assumptions about gender roles in combat operations. Support personnel demonstrating tactical capabilities that rival those of conventional special operations forces. What she couldn't mention in even this classified setting were the specific missions that had validated such capabilities. Female snipers achieving kill ratios in urban environments where male operators might attract unwanted attention. Medical specialists conducting precision eliminations that preserved operational security while achieving strategic objectives. Personnel whose official job descriptions provided perfect cover for capabilities that transcended conventional military categories. The programs that had evolved from studying Olivia's shooting now operated on every continent, producing specialists whose achievements remained classified, but whose influence shaped global security dynamics. They worked in environments where conventional special operations forces might be compromised, their diverse backgrounds providing access to targets and opportunities that traditional military thinking had overlooked. Her legacy extends far beyond individual achievement, Chang told the assembled experts. She forced institutions to recognize that human potential exceeds our ability to measure or predict it. That capability transcends categories we used to organize military structure. After the presentation, Rodriguez approached with documents that bore classification markings above Chang's security clearance. "There's something you should know about the original competition," he said quietly. "Something that wasn't included in official records." He handed her a folder containing photographs that had been classified for 2 decades. They showed Olivia during moments between stages of the competition consulting with personnel whose faces had been redacted from official documentation, examining equipment that didn't appear in standard inventories, receiving instructions from figures whose presence couldn't be publicly acknowledged. She wasn't just competing, Rodriguez explained. She was being evaluated for assignment to programs that required capabilities she had already demonstrated in operational environments. The competition was a formal assessment disguised as athletic exhibition. The revelation recontextualized everything Chang thought she knew about the historic shooting demonstration. Olivia hadn't been an unexpected participant whose invitation had raised eyebrows. She had been a known quantity whose capabilities required formal verification before deployment to assignments that demanded absolute precision under extreme stress. "Where is she now?" Chang asked, though she suspected the answer would involve classifications above her access level. Rodriguez smiled, but didn't answer directly. Staff Sergeant Smith served her country with distinction until her death in 2027. The circumstances of her death remain classified, but her contributions to national security continue to influence operations worldwide. The non-answer carried implications that Chang was learning to recognize. Olivia had transcended competitive shooting to become something approaching a legend, a thought figure whose actual assignments remained classified, but whose influence shaped everything modern military specialists did. The Olivia Smith Center for Advanced Marksmanship occupied a facility that didn't appear on public maps, training specialists whose capabilities continued to challenge understanding of human potential. Students came from diverse backgrounds, united only by psychological profiles and physiological markers that predicted exceptional performance under extreme conditions. Sarah Martinez, granddaughter of the original competition's ballistics analyst, stood before her newest class of students, her presentation displaying performance metrics that had been declassified after 20 years of operational success. 25 years ago, a female medic demonstrated shooting that forced institutions to confront assumptions they had never questioned, she told the assembled trainees. Her performance revealed that capability transcends every category we use to organize military structure. Among her students, She saw the same mix of curiosity and skepticism that had characterized reactions to Olivia's original invitation to compete among elite marksmen. But skepticism was quickly overcome by training standards that demanded excellence regardless of background, gender, or traditional qualifications. The program's graduates now served in every theater of global operations, their diverse backgrounds providing cover for assignments that required capabilities no one expected them to possess. They were living proof that human potential exceeded institutional ability to measure or predict it. "Every shot you take honors her memory," Martinez told her students. "Every mission you complete validates her demonstration that excellence transcends expectation. Every moment you choose capability over category continues her legacy." After the class, Martinez returned to her office where a display case contained artifacts from the historic competition, Olivia's ammunition can, Rabbit's original spotting scope, and a target from the 1,000-yard line that showed 10 impacts. Clustered in a group smaller than a silver dollar, below the display, a simple plaque bore the motto that had become synonymous with programs that challenged conventional military thinking: "Capability transcends categories." It was a lesson that Olivia Smith had taught through demonstration rather than discussion, showing rather than telling institutions what was possible when human potential was properly recognized and developed. Competition that had revealed her unprecedented abilities was now remembered as the moment when military excellence expanded beyond traditional boundaries. Her 40 consecutive shots had shattered assumptions about gender, specialization, and human limitation that had constrained institutional thinking for generations. And in operational environments around the world, her spiritual descendants continued that legacy: female snipers achieving impossible shots, support personnel demonstrating tactical brilliance, soldiers whose capabilities transcended every assumption about what was possible when excellence was pursued without regard for conventional categories. The silence that had followed her final shot at the 1,000-yard line had been broken by applause that continued to echo across military installations worldwide, where her example inspired performance that exceeded all understanding of human potential. Staff Sergeant Olivia Smith had proven that some people simply can't be categorized, measured, or contained by institutional expectations. Her legacy lived in every shot that challenged assumption, every mission that redefined possibility, every moment when human capability exceeded the boundaries that others considered absolute. The rifle's weight had felt familiar in her hands 20 years ago, like an old friend returning after years of separation. Now that rifle rested in a museum, while her influence shaped operations that continued to prove that capability would always transcend the categories used to contain it. In the end, she had silenced more than just her critics at a mountain competition. She had silenced every voice that suggested human potential could be predicted, measured, or constrained by conventional understanding. Her 40 shots had spoken louder than any argument, proving that excellence recognizes no boundaries except those imposed by imagination and institutional fear. The competition had ended, but her revolution continued in every specialist who exceeded expectation, every mission that redefined possibility, every moment when human capability proved that categories were made to be transcended rather than accepted. 25 years later, the question was no longer whether Olivia Smith could handle that rifle. The question was whether institutions could handle the implications of what she had proven possible when human potential was properly recognized, developed, and deployed without regard for conventional limitations. Her answer echoed across every range where her successors trained, every operational theater where they served, every moment when excellence transcended expectation. Capability knows no boundaries, except those we impose upon ourselves. The 40 shots that had silenced everyone at a Colorado mountain competition continued to resonate across a world where her legacy lived in every specialist who chose excellence over category, performance over prejudice, capability over conventional limitation, and in facilities that didn't exist on official maps, New generations of unconventional warriors continued to prove that Olivia Smith's revolution was just the beginning of possibilities that institutions were still learning to understand. In memory of all who choose capability over category, excellence over expectation, and human potential over institutional limitation. Thank you for watching this incredible story of breaking barriers and exceeding expectations. If you enjoyed seeing Olivia prove that capability transcends categories, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring military tales. Your support helps us bring you these amazing stories.